Hello, welcome everyone to the Urban Institute's Building Community Power and Institutionalizing Participatory Methods event. My name is Elsa Falkenberger, and I'm a Principal Research Associate at the Urban Institute and the Director of our Community Engagement Resource Center. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a white woman with curly blonde hair wearing a navy blue short sleeve blouse. Today, I'm in Washington, D.C. on the land of the Piscataway and Nacotchunk or Atnacostan people. I hope that our event today honors the people whose land we inhabit by not only lifting up participatory methods, but the value at the core of tribal communities' sovereignty. Tribal engagements set the bar for our institutional commitments to participatory methods, the theme of today's discussion. I'm thrilled to use Urban Institute's platform to highlight the voices, vision, and commitments of several partners who represent innovative approaches to promoting community power and participatory methods in the fields of research, policy, and practice. And not just in individual projects or initiatives, but at a larger institutional level that will help support and grow participatory methods more systematically in their work. I will give you a little background about our efforts at Urban, and then I'll turn it over to our guest speakers. It has been many years coming to get here today. Community engagement and participatory methods that include communities and people with lived experience as fellow experts and decision makers rather than as research subjects, constituents, or program participants is certainly not a novel idea. However, it is also not standard practice that is implemented systematically or supported consistently by organizations and institutions that control or have access to financial resources and policy-making power. In doing this, we try to be nuanced in how we define community, and to keep in mind that all individuals bring a variety of identities, experiences, and other characteristics, no matter their formal position. At Urban, we began with a single community-based participatory research grant from the National Institutes of Health, NIH, from the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities in 2012, an initiative led by my colleague and dear friend Sue Popkin, and community leaders from Benning Terrace, a DC Housing Authority public housing community here in Washington, DC. This work prompted us to create a community engaged methods group at Urban to support growth of this methodology internally and over the past decade. And with investments by Urban internally and the Kauffman Foundation to launch the Community Engagement Resource Center to provide practical tools, resources, and opportunities for folks working at the intersection of research, policy, and practice, looking to center community voice and power. We know that for communities, whether bound together by geography, identity, experience, and other, hold power, but that power is often unacknowledged. Communities are best suited to affect the change that will impact their lives directly. We also know that research has a long history of being extractive, even when the intended goal is to support, improve, or strengthen communities. We're going to pull up a graphic right now that is still under development by our team at Urban that shows the value and various motives for participatory methods. I won't read the text in detail, but essentially you can see here, and I'll describe that on the left, we have accuracy, sometimes described as rigor. Second is impact, and third is sustainability, all resting on the bedrock of ethics. So a very brief overview is that collaborating with communities as experts leads to more robust efforts and data that has greater and more sustained processes and impact. Any of these three at the top, in some sense, is enough of a motivating factor to engage in participatory work. However, the fourth factor, the essential bedrock, is ethics, ensuring that we engage in participatory work that invests in community-led priorities, shifts power, and sustains partnership-based work, ensures that we can break the cycle of extraction and exclusion from research, from policy, and from direct services or practice. It's also important for me to note that community work is not always geographic or neighborhood level. Community can also be formed through shared identities, experiences, or joint aspirational goals, and can be held at city, state, national, and international levels. The COVID-19 pandemic taught us both how to value good partnership and relationships as the most important tenet, and also taught us how to do things virtually and uncovered the barriers that communities face when trying to access basic needs, such as food, PPE, and now technology and broadband, which we will hear more about shortly. This invested, organic, and sustained approach to partnership are core to community engaged work. To borrow a power statement from the disability rights movement, nothing about us without us. This week, we lost a fearless and incredibly effective leader from the disability rights community, Judy Heumann, and we hope our commitment to inclusion and participatory methods lives up to the high bar she set for our country. We also come to this work because of an understanding of our shared humanity. As Australian academic and activist Leela Watson once said, inspired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together." With that shared, it's my pleasure to welcome a group of my fierce, innovative colleagues who are Urban Platform today to share in a set of lightning round reflections. I won't introduce everyone at length. Instead, we have everyone's bios listed on the event page on Urban's website, and I will introduce each pair of presenters briefly as they come on screen. The pairs include a community-based representative, along with someone from a larger institution working on similar goals and topics. Each speaker will have only 6 minutes. This in no way does justice to their efforts, but my hope is that each of you present today is able to take with you the examples that most apply to you as an individual and for the institutions and communities with whom you work. Now a few housekeeping items. This first session is webinar format, which means that all participants are muted, but you can type your questions or comments into the Q&A box at any time. In fact, we encourage as much use of that box. We will be collecting all of your questions and comments, and we'll answer and share all of them in a write-up after the event, along with a recording of the event. And in addition to questions, please share your name and contact information and any comments, resources, or links you would like to share with participants. And we'll have a form that we can share for doing this. Later today at 3 p.m. Eastern, we will be having the more participatory portion of our event with a set of breakout group discussions. The registration is now closed for that event as we maxed out on the capacity for that. But we look forward to holding future discussion sessions with all of you. You can hide captions or adjust captioning settings with the live transcript button. And if you're having any tech issues or questions about that, please contact Ivy Hunter in the chat who can help troubleshoot. We are also recording this event today, and you should have seen an alert to that when you joined the meeting. And now at last, after that long introduction, I will pass the mic to today's speaker. I invite Tisha and William to turn on their cameras as I briefly introduce them. We have Tisha Miller, who is the Assistant Vice President and Community Affairs Officer from the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, and William Wells, who is the Executive Director from Esteem Village. All yours, Tisha.
Thank you, Elsa. And good morning. As Elsa mentioned, I am Tisha Miller. At the time of this work, I was the Assistant Vice President and Community Affairs Officer at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. I represent the Federal Reserve Bank system leadership, and we're grateful for the partnership of the Urban Institute and Esteem Village, as well as the other esteemed partners who are on this webinar today. You may or may not be aware that the Federal Reserve System is the central bank of the United States. And as such, we conduct the nation's monetary policy. We also work to support maximum employment, stable prices, and moderate long-term interest rates in the U.S. economy. The Board of Governors is an agency of the federal government that reports to and is directly accountable to Congress. They provide general guidance for our Federal Reserve System, and they oversee the 12 reserve system banks. Given our work, it is no surprise that the board alone employs more than 400 PhD economists. The 12 reserve banks employ others. We excel at traditional quantitative research. We also have a community development function. Each reserve bank has a community development department formed soon after Congress passed the Community Reinvestment Act more than 40 years ago. We promote economic development and the public's understanding that leads to progress for lower income individuals and communities. The Kansas City Fed serves all or part of 7 states. Our focus areas are small business, workforce development, digital inclusion, and community development investments. which helps banks meet their CRA requirements. The Board of Governors created an I2I award, which stands for Innovation to Impact, to support community development staff in creating novel yet collaborative solutions that generate valuable insights regarding a known challenge. The competition comes with a grant for the winning project. Given our emphasis on traditional quantitative research, it was groundbreaking when the board selected as the 2020 winner a multi-bank effort to incorporate community engaged research. The project is called PAR for Fed Success. PAR stands for Participatory Action Research. So the PAR 4 effort involved multiple reserve banks. In just 3 years, we've gone from expert presentations to expert-supported pilots to internal mentorship. PAR 4 is led by community development staff from several reserve banks. I particularly value community engaged research. As the Community Development Department Director, I, along with my peers and colleagues, fund and also advise the PAR 4 effort. We wanted to move further along the continuum of community engaged research, recognizing that not everything will be participatory action research. The reserve banks, well, we're not necessarily built for community engaged research. Some of our typical processes need to change, but we found it was doable, and we found ways to work to support this effort collaboratively. So the community development teams system-wide were supportive, and we were energized by the idea of sharing power, and as Elsa put it moments ago, not being extractive. Still, this was new for us. So we embarked upon pilots. And the pilot efforts were intended to build our muscle in community engaged research. 3 of the 4 pilots were data walks. Kansas City was the first to hold its data walk in October 2022. So one of our focus areas is digital inclusion. We wanted to hear from the residents of neighborhoods where few subscribe to broadband. So we started in an urban neighborhood, and we may repeat this in a suburban neighborhood, but for now we'll focus on the work that was conducted in October in an urban neighborhood entitled Wendell Phillips. Wendell Phillips is surrounded by our 18th and Vine Historic District. We had just 2 months to plan and hold the event, so it was indeed a sprint. I was one of the volunteer note takers. Now, that's not what's important here. What's important is that the facilitators were high school students from our partner, A-STEAM Village. William Wells is the founder and executive director of A-STEAM Village. It was his leadership, passion, guidance, and amazing team that were all critical to the success of this event. So it's vitally important that William joins me here today. And I'm going to pass it over to William to explain a little bit more about who he is and what all A-STEAM Village brought to this amazing event for it to be so successful. William?
Thank you, Tisha, and thank you for the kind, humbling words of encouragement. My name is William Wells. I'm so happy to be here. When Jeremy Hagel and Jennifer Walding and Tisha from the Federal Reserve Bank of Greater Kansas City asked us to participate, it was a definite yes. See, STEAM Village, we started out as a K through 12 STEM education program, reaching urban youth who we knew were not getting access to the same resources in the STEM education field that would enable them to participate gainfully in the 21st century knowledge and information economy that we're in today. So I want to start with a quote from Dr. King that I think is the foundation of what the Federal Reserve and Urban and many other organizations are trying to do around community engagement, community empowerment, community voice. And this quote is, "Rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There is an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think." And I say that as foundational because what Urban and the Federal Reserve Bank did when they came to STEAM Village, little STEAM Village, right? And said, "Will you partner with us?" And we said, absolutely. And then they empowered us to say, okay, who in the community can we bring into this? And we said the Wendell Phillips neighborhood, because the city has us under contract to close the digital divide and do digital inclusion with these middle school and high school students who are pulling fiber, managing a network, building a network, educating and informing a community. And we turned it over to John James, who is the president of Wendell Phillips, who got his community, Wendell Phillips Neighborhood Association members to recruit. And then the young people recruited, Esteemed Village recruited. So what we ended up having were young people facilitating the workshops in conjunction with the Federal Reserve Bank and the community, giving their voice. And what we found out was, hey, I don't know what broadband is, or I don't know how to use it, or I have no clue of how to participate in the economy. And so now with all of that data, and we're not going to turn the Titanic on the dime. This is going to be a long process. But the beauty is this. People are listening and they're recognizing that the answers to the solutions in our communities across this great country are in the communities that we're trying to say we need to build up. But we're looking at it a different approach. Listen to what they say. Let's take what they say and let them be a part of the design, the planning, the build, and the sustainability of our communities. And when we get that on a mass scale across, we will see reductions in poverty. We will see reductions in crime. So that was the reason why we wanted to do this. And I am, again, just humbled and thankful and grateful to Urban and the Federal Reserve Bank. And I can't leave out, and I will not leave out, all of our students, all of the community, and this is a small step as it is, it was a big step, and we're looking forward to the next steps that proceed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tisha and William. Let us ride off of that energy to not look or be satisfied with easy answers and to never leave things half-baked. So thank you for that quote and those words, William. I now invite Harlan and Angela to put their cameras on. Harlan Pruden is the Indigenous Knowledge Translation Lead in British Columbia Center for Disease Control, and Angela Bednarik is the Project Director at the Evidence Project at the Pew Charitable Trusts. All yours, Harlan.
Greetings. Greetings, my relatives. My government name is Harlan Pruden, and thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I just want to share my screen with you all, because what I'm going to be talking about is relational accountability in research setting and/or settings. And, oh, my other name is going to be Motormouth Mabel because I'm going to be talking so fast. So I just wanted to talk and just introduce you all to the Two-Spirit Dry Lab. The Two-Spirit Dry Lab is Turtle Island's first ever research group that solely focuses on Two-Spirit people. Those are Indigenous, gender, and/or sexually diverse folks. And as a result of colonization, we were pushed from our community. So how we work as a Two-Spirit Dry Lab is centering of Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing. We are multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary collaboration of Indigenous and non-Indigenous epidemiologists, knowledge translation leads, sociologists, researchers, community members, and we also have 2 attending elders. We try to use in best effort.
Harlan, I'm so sorry. It looks like you might be sharing your screensaver instead of your
what?
slides.
And I practiced. Oh no.
Practice, but we're still all learning, and it's totally acceptable to not get everything right all the time, especially in this.
Now, do you see the lab?
No.
Okay, then you know what?
Harlan, if you send me your slides, we can have Angela share,
totally
and then we'll go to you.
We will not do any screen sharing. We'll just go back to old school, old school oral talking, no visuals. And so we, in a best effort, we try to use Indigenous methodologies and approaches, like using teachings from this Mi'kmaq elder, or Mi'kmaq Elder Marshall, who talks about two-eyed seeing approach. Two-eyed seeing approach is from one eye, we look at Western knowledges, some parts of and elements of Western knowledges, and from the other eye, Indigenous knowledges, and we put them in concert with one another and try to find that space. Our meetings and work are done in the circle. It's how we were formed. So we are a collaborative, non-hierarchical, and we also use consensus decision-making processes where we move as one as a lab. So there's an attentiveness on process, and then outcomes come from that. We are a lab of shared leadership. And so our team was drawn together with a unity of purpose, with a deep commitment to consensus decision-making processes, and a requirement of acceptance of all members. And these are combined with the following principles or tools of leadership. And that is equality and conversational turn-taking. And that would be what we would call our talking circle protocols. Taking the time to get to know one another. And this concept is that for us as Indigenous people is that a priori to knowledge is that all knowledge is relational. Like you can have a cure for cancer, but if you don't have a network to share that in, or you're using such incredibly inaccessible language and no one understands what you're talking about, do you have a cure for knowledge? You don't. And so we lean into relationship, and everything is relational driven. And that's why this talk is called relational accountability. And then also listening actively or attentively, or what we call deep listening, so that not only do we listen to what is being said, but we also listen into the void of what's not being said. And these components create a possibility for psychological safety, resulting in the following outcomes: supporting each other so that we can bring forth the best ideas, working together in mindful, respectful, and because it's relationship driven, I would also argue for in loving ways. And then finally, developing innovative capabilities. Now, we are a lab of quantitative research. And so this sounds a little wacky, like how is quant research informed by mindful, respectful, and loving ways? And so these are models in which that we're trying to work out as a lab. And so you'd see my screen, you would see a beautiful picture of the Two-Spirit Dry Labs logo, which you can go to our website and check it out. And I'll pop it into the chat. That from our a Coast Salish Two-Spirit artist named Margaret August. The design of our logo of the Two-Spirit Dry Lab depicts a moon, which is symbolic of the many cycles of moving forward and in conducting Indigenous-based research. The face, and that's a face, is split down the middle to represent the masculine and feminine energy of us as Two-Spirit people. And the forehead has a salmon, Coast Salish salmon, and they're facing each other, which also is a nod that most of our lab is based here, but not all on the West Coast environment. And so it's of a moon, and so it's relational accountability and learning from the moon. And so we start off in a cycle of a new moon, new relationships, where relationships are established or reestablished. And then when we go to the next phase of the moon, which would be the waxing crescent, is when we get to know our research partners, our communities, but we also, as a lab, we're going through that of getting to know one another. And then in the first quarter, we sit with our community members and like, hey, what are your research needs? What do you need help with of either supporting or advancing your work with and for Indigenous communities and or Two-Spirit people? And a waxing gibbous, the refinement of the research question, and that's also, we're bound by data. Like if we don't ask about pet membership or pet ownership, we can't provide that data. So if a community is like, we want to know about like pet health, we can't ask that question. And then once we've refined the question, then the Two-Spirit Dry Lab, and this is where the full moon comes in, is where we go to work. Then we do is the waning gibbous, which is our initial report back to a community. And then and we get more information. And then we do in the third quarter is when we actually turn over all of the information. And then in the last quarter is that because of our data governance and commitment is that we go back to our community partner like, hey, community partner, although you have the information and you're acting on it, can we publish our results? And if they say no, we're like, that's cool. The medicine and the work is already happening. But if they say yes, then we start typing up our results and we start journal shopping. And so we get our social credit, but the information is already out there. So if no one reads our articles, we don't care. The community has gotten what they wanted and they're popping and acting on it. So that is, I think, is ethical, but it's also kind of cool and it's driven by relationships and we must honor that relationship. Thank you so much. Hi.
Thanks, Harlan. That was wonderful, even without slides. So you did a good job of creating a vision, in our head. So thank you for that. And I'm just thrilled to be here. Thanks to the Urban Institute for setting this up and gathering all of us together around this table today. It's really exciting. So the Evidence Project at Pew and my team at Pew is really focused on how do we make more of all this really good stuff? Like how can we make more of this really meaningful community engagement, different ways of bringing together different knowledge sources? How can we make more of this in the world? And so we think about that in a couple of different ways. One is how do we build knowledge about how these different strategies work? How can we support practice? So as people gain knowledge about how to do community engagement, how can we support more of those good practices and promising strategies? How do we foster enabling conditions most broadly? So how can we incentivize more of this kind of work in all kinds of institutions? So even those that might have been traditionally resistant to this kind of community engagement, how can we make more of that? And that includes strengthening capacity. So how do we understand who needs to do what and how they need to do that differently and what kind of tools do they need? So we do that primarily through facilitating a couple of platforms and networks. One is a broad network called the Transforming Evidence Network that includes community organizations, researchers who are studying this kind of work, various kinds of practitioners in different kinds of government settings, lots of folks who want to come together across very different issue areas to learn together and to share their knowledge and to build their practice. We also facilitate a funder network that is called the Transforming Evidence Funders Network. That's really a sister network to that broader one that convenes public and private funders from around the world who've all gotten really, really interested in engagement as a tool to producing better knowledge to solve our problems. And while that sounds great, that's hard to, as we know, as many on the call know today, that's really hard to do. So these funders have come together to understand how can they both change their own practices to enable more of the kinds of strategies we all hope for, and how can we link arms to really boost enabling conditions. So I'll just spend, I know there's lots of good speakers, so I'm just going to roll really quickly through a little bit more detail on each of these. And I'll really focus on this sort of enabling conditions. So they, through both the broader network and the funder network, we've been really focused on what does it mean for a research institution to change their practices, to really think about how to incentivize much more community engagement, possibly, ideally work in true partnership with folks outside research institutions. What does it mean to do that? What should centers that are in research institutions, what should that look like? What should promotion and tenure look like? And then how can funders do a better job of recentering power so that research funding goes directly to community organizations. What does it look like to do research funding in that way? So we've really been thinking about in both of these networks how to shift power, how to shift sort of convention, like how we've always done things. How do we shift that so we're doing more of that? And I'll just say, as an undercurrent, we've really focused on ensuring that equity is central to all the strategies and systems we're supporting, and that includes throughout these two networks. So this is one of the reasons we're really excited to engage in conversations like this and develop close relationship with folks like Harlan and others who are helping us to think about how to enable relationships. What do enabling conditions even look like? Are we even thinking about that in the right ways? What haven't we thought about? And what does it mean to really transform our organizations and institutional structures around the world to give us the kind of problem-solving processes that we really need to tackle climate or economic inequality, any of the issues that are on the table today. So we've got some ways to connect with us, so we welcome any follow-up. And with that, I will turn it back to Elsa.
Thank you so much, Harlan and Angela, for those really thoughtful overview of the importance of relationships, whether they're with individuals or organizations. I will now invite my colleagues, Helen Skipper and, sorry, I skipped two. I'm really sorry, Gabrielle, it's you. I'll now invite Gabrielle Newell, you were right, and Jerry LeBeau to come on camera. Gabrielle is a senior social science research analyst at the Office of Planning, Research and Evaluation within the Administration for Children and Families at HHS. And Jerry LeBeau is the Director of Operations at the Black Hills Community Loan Fund. All yours, Gabrielle.
Amazing. Thank you, Elsa, and thank you for including us in this discussion. My name is Gabrielle Newell. I use she, her pronouns. And as Elsa said, I'm a senior social science research analyst within the Office of Planning, Research and Evaluation within the Administration for Children and Families. Our research office is within the Administration for Children and Families, which is a division of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Many social service programs live within the Administration for Children and Families. Those include the nation's child welfare system, the office that oversees the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, and many, many more. OPRE is the research office supporting all of those different programs. And our mission is to build evidence to improve the lives of children and families. And I encourage you to visit our website, which will be dropped in the chat in just a second. Great, thank you. We'll move on to the next slide. And the one after that. Great, yes. Thank you. And just going back one more, I am really guided by this reflection from the late Toni Morrison. So in our research office, within the Office of Planning, Research and Evaluation, we are cultivating an awareness of our own positionality. This includes sensitivity to the historical incidences of harm of federally funded research, as well as the responsibility we have today to be diligent arbitrators of public funds and strengthen how we understand the effectiveness of programs and the experiences of those who participate in them. And we have not just a responsibility, but also an opportunity. And this reflection from Toni Morrison, when you find yourself in positions of trust and power, dream a little before you think. In OPRE, we are dreaming about how we can use our position to build into research practices and expectation to engage participants of the programs we evaluate, as well as those who administer these programs in decision-making throughout the research process. We are dreaming about how we, as a research office in the federal government, can value more voices as we build evidence and shape knowledge. And we know that this has been done before. I think of the early work of a personal icon, Zora Neale Hurston. Before writing her heralded novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, she trained as an anthropologist and received funding from a predecessor agency to our agency. It was known at the time as Works Progress Administration. And she was tasked with chronicling life histories of Black people in Florida in the 1930s. So I remember that in the history of our agency, we've invested federal dollars in paying an emerging scholar to collect and preserve the stories of ordinary yet important Black people in the 1930s. So this has been done before, and we can continue to build out our practices that value the experiences of those who participate in our programs. And now I will share a bit about what we're dreaming and building in OPRE. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a word about what we've done. OPRE, we've compiled resources that we've already produced, funded, and produced that advance racial equity. On this resource page, pictured on the slide, we do a few things. We highlight OPRE-sponsored efforts that help build the foundation for these more equitable approaches and further our understanding of issues related to racial equity. We also highlight work that engages as critical partners those who interact with our programs, including program staff and program participants. Next slide, please. As we seek to make greater commitments to incorporating participatory methods, we've also sought to do that by equipping ourselves in the use of participatory methods and signaling to our partners that this is a priority for us. So pictured on this slide is a webpage of the 2021 OPRE methods meeting. And that meeting convened researchers, evaluators, federal staff, and many others to explore research approaches that engage communities throughout the research process and present examples that could be applied in the context of federally sponsored research and evaluation. I invite you to visit the meeting website, which Elsa just dropped in the chat, for more background about that meeting, the topics covered in a meeting summary. Next slide, please. We're also institutionalizing this commitment by incorporating into the ACF, the Administration for Children and Families, into our evaluation policy, explicit discussion of the value of participatory methods and advancing equity through research and evaluation. You can read the ACF evaluation policy or watch a brief video about the evaluation policy at the link on the slide that Elsa's also just shared in the chat. Thank you, Elsa. Next slide, please. And in an effort I'm really excited to share today, we've also taken steps to incorporate participatory methods across OPRE-funded projects. In 2021, we launched Advancing Contextual Analysis and Methods for Participant Engagement, also known as CAMP, and Urban Institute is supporting this work. And the purpose is to build out our infrastructure to incorporate participatory methods. We have developed a community advisory board. We've conducted a literature review and environmental scan on the use of contextual analysis, and we are engaging an equity consultant, the urban team, to advise OPRE projects on approaching research and program improvement with an equity focus. So I invite you to join us for our breakout during part 2 to learn more about this effort, or engage with us on the project page here. And we'll get to hear more from Jerry LeBeau in just a minute about her experiences participating in the CAB. And finally, I'll just say another word, which is that you can read about how one team within the Office of Planning, Research, and Evaluation, the Division of Family Strengthening, how they are actively engaging participants and external partners in developing their learning agenda, which guides their investments in new research and evaluation projects. A brief about that process is pictured on the slide. And with that, I will pass the microphone, but just before I do, a word of introduction for Jerry LeBeau. I first met Jerry when I visited her team in Rapid City, South Dakota, when she was managing a job training program, equipping people to enter and advance in the health professions. OPRE, our research office, funded and oversaw a research study about the program. In the few days that I got to spend with her team, not only did we talk about how the program was being implemented, but Jerry and her team made a point to make sure that we left with an acute understanding of the place. We visited Pine Ridge Reservation of the Oglala Lakota people and the gravesite of up to nearly 300 Lakota people massacred by the US Army at Wounded Knee in 1890. They helped us to understand the harm tribal communities in the Great Plains regions have suffered at the hands of the federal government and how that influences what they're building today. So from that, I left with a renewed understanding of my own responsibility as a federal government employee and an urgency to build ways to listen more closely. And with that, I introduce Jerry LeBeau, Director of Operations for the Black Hills Community Loan Fund, and also a current member of the Community Advisory Board as part of OPRE's CAMP project. And to you, Jerry.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to share a little bit about our program at the Great Plains Tribal Leaders Health Board. We had the Tribal Health Proficiency Opportunity Grant through the Administration for Children and Families, and it was an opportunity for us to help our population, our relatives, get into a healthcare training and then help them find a job in that profession. So we worked with National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago. They did the evaluation and they were very careful about listening to what we as the staff did and also incorporating that into their evaluation methods. And what they listened to was that the talking circles seemed to work the best for our relatives. And that created that safe opportunity for them, for our relatives to share what they were learning through the program and how that was, they were being evaluated. And they were also, NORC was also very careful about making sure that we all understood the process of the evaluation methods that they were using and the reason for them. And we were able to explain that to our participants in the program so they understood what it was totally up to them if they wanted to participate in the evaluation methods. So we're really grateful for the opportunity to be able to share that with our participants in the program. It made it seem understandable and totally their option to participate or not. And they made sure that it was ethical and that if there was something that they didn't want shared, that they just wanted with the evaluators, that was fine with the evaluators. They were very careful on making sure that if anybody wanted to talk to them at any time, that was also an option for them to do. And they let us know what what the results were from their evaluation. So we had our program served the different reservations in South Dakota. So we were on Pine Ridge, we were on Rosebud, we were on Cheyenne River, and then also in the urban area of Rapid City. So we served a diverse section across South Dakota. And they did do site visits to the different reservations so they could see, they could be in those communities and find out what was going on in those communities and what worked for our participants. And I really think I appreciated, was grateful for the time they took and the effort they took to make sure that everyone understood what was going on with the evaluation.
Thank you so much, Jerry and Gabrielle. Really digging into acknowledging history, making space for it, thinking about our positionality and how important both of those are in building trust and relationships. I'd now like to invite our next two speakers, Skip and Selena, to turn on their cameras. Helen Skipper is the Executive Director at the New York City Justice Peer Initiative, and Selena Barrios Milner is the Co-Vice President of the Office of Race and Equity Research at the Urban Institute. Skip, to you.
Hello. How is everybody? So grateful to be here. I did not know I was starting first, but always happy to jump in. Just a little bit of background. I first came to Urban as a community research assistant on the credible messenger research study um, that was being done in New York City. I am a peer. I am a behavioral health peer. I am certified in both substance abuse and mental health. I am also directly impacted by systems involvement, every major system. So we're talking about the criminal justice system. We're talking about the substance abuse system. We're talking about the mental health system. As a peer, I've always fought to be validated, to show that my lived experience, my subject matter expertise is recognized and is validated. And because not claiming this for myself, but because Black and brown bodies are always the ones that are researched, we are always the researchees. We are never the researchers. When this project was announced, and it was announced as a paid position as a community research assistant, it was not the pay. I was already the manager of peer services at my former position. It wasn't about the pay, it was about the chance to jump into a valid research project where I was not the researchee. I had a chance to be the researcher. Urban created an atmosphere where we were part of the researchers. We were not coming in. We were not coming in where the research was already established. We were coming in from the bottom. We were coming in where the research was being formulated. We were coming in where the questions were being formulated. We were taught every aspect of research. We were coming in from the interviewing process. We came in and we were taught coding. We were taught everything about participatory research. We were taught research from the bottom up, not being brought in as an afterthought. Oh, we need a community voice. Let's bring someone in. This is what endeared me to this process. I am currently in school studying to be a researcher. I am a criminologist. I am entering into a master's PhD program in the fall. I have always said that in order to transform these oppressive systems, we are not begging for a seat at the table anymore. We are the table. You need to come sit with us. Urban created that opportunity for those of us who have been marginalized, who have never had a voice or a seat at the table. Shirley Chisholm once said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. I don't say that. I am not dragging a folding chair anywhere. I'm sorry. I say, I am the table. You need to come sit with me. But because of my involvement in this research study, of which I am a co-author, I now hold a very near and dear position to me with Urban as a community consultant. I now sit on several research projects with them. And I believe and I know that the fact that Urban is lifting up community voices as they enter into these communities in order to perform any type of research, but the fact that they want to elevate the community voice. They're not just saying, oh, we're coming in to do research. They are elevating the community voice. We're not having another episode of Henrietta Lacks. We're not doing something that looks like what they did with the Tuskegee Airmen. We are pushing forward the fact that you live in the community, you're from the community, you are the champion and you are the community voice. You know what's going on with the community. And I appreciate that. And I will forever keep I want to say, collaboration with Urban. Once I graduate with my PhD, I hope to become a researcher at Urban. And I will now, hold on a minute. I think I'm well under my 6 minutes. I can get wordy at times, but I don't want to be that wordy with this. And I will now pass that back to you, and I'm looking for it right now. You guys want to give me some help with this? Yeah, I'll
It is
pass
Selena.
it to Selena. I got it. I got it.
Thank you, Skip. You know, I used to run relay, so I'm always waiting for the baton. So
There you go.
ready.
You got it.
Thank you so much, Skip. I'm Selena
Mhm.
Vargas Milner. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Latina woman and wearing a black blazer and green shirt. And today I'm joining you from Boston on the land of the Massachusetts. I want to start by thanking you, Skip, for the trust you have put in Urban and for learning with us and guiding us as a community researcher in the Credible Messengers Project, as a member of our pilot institutional community advisory board, similar to the model that Gabrielle mentioned they're using at OPRE, and as an advisor on many projects, but in particular the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's work on catalyzing leadership for equity. Your expertise and wisdom has been invaluable, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. So I'm an immigrant from Venezuela, and I moved to the United States as a child in elementary school to Cincinnati, Ohio, and I had the experience of navigating spaces that weren't designed with me in mind, and that's what led me to a career in what we now call equity, what I just thought was fighting for my people my whole life. And I had the privilege of being the chief equity officer in the city of Boston during the time of the pandemic. And that experience really, well, you know, we're still in the pandemic, but the beginning of the pandemic, that experience really where you had to make real-time decisions about investing resources, consulting the community. Is it better to do, you know, a large investment with the most vulnerable, or what are the different approaches to really not just survive but thrive following the pandemic? And having to make those decisions really made me want to have more space and time to think of how we develop tools and resources for decision makers at all levels of government and in the community to embed equity into their work. So that's why I joined the Urban Institute in the newly formed Office of Race and Equity Research. Here, we aim to be an innovation hub that provides advisory services, thought partnership, and technical assistance for a wide range of change makers. And we provide, but we also learn from those very people in learning about what policies work, how we measure impact, and how we can replicate things that are working throughout the country. Central to that work and central to all of equity work is community engagement and centering community voices and experience in order to dismantle structural racism and foster prosperity. We can't really do that without centering those experiences. And that's why we are so excited and proud to be hosting the Community Engagement Resource Center along with the Disability Equity Policy Initiative at the Urban Institute, because we think that you have to build equity at the beginning of policy design, project design, when you're asking those research questions. And we're really excited to work with Elsa and Lauren and the team and all of you here today to really not just make our work better, but make the work of policy and government more centered in equity. And so I want to thank you all for your work and pass it back to Elsa.
Thank you so much, Skip and Selena. Really thought-provoking ideas, and love to hear the commitments from my own organization expressed. So thank you, Selena. I would now like to invite our last two speakers, Chaya and Alicia, to turn on their screens. Chaya Kolavali is the Senior Program Officer at the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, and Alicia Small is a Scholar for Economic Growth at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Chaya, on to you.
Thank you, Elsa. Good morning. As Elsa said, my name is Chaya Kolavali, and I'm thrilled to be here today representing the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, and so excited to be a supporter of CERC since we know how critically important it is for all of us to start rethinking how we conduct and implement research. both to create more equity in the process of knowledge creation and also to increase the chance that research has actual societal impact. Today, in our brief time together, I'd like to share a little bit of my team's thinking that has guided our recent investments in community engaged research before I pass it off to Alicia, one of our grantees, who's been leading engaged research alongside community leaders in Houston, exploring the impact of gentrification on small business. So I'm a senior program officer on the research team at the Kauffman Foundation, where I lead on our team's efforts to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion in our work. The Kauffman Foundation is a private, nonpartisan foundation based in Kansas City, Missouri, that provides access to opportunities that help people achieve financial stability, upward mobility, and economic prosperity, regardless of race, gender, or geography. Our research team works to fund and disseminate practical, actionable, and rigorous research on how to create ideal conditions for entrepreneurs in their communities, with a particular focus on supporting systemically marginalized entrepreneurs. Supporting engagement and collaboration between researchers and communities has become a key way that we meet a number of directives in our work. It's a pillar for how we work to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in the knowledge we produce, and it's also integral to the creation of actionable, rigorous knowledge. We've worked to embed community voice and participation into our grant-making approaches in a number of ways. We launched a pilot portfolio in 2021, community-engaged approaches to studying entrepreneurship and equity, alongside the development of an ongoing peer learning cohort for those grantees, in hopes of developing capacity and visibility of the work. We followed that up with a second portfolio in 2022, our Inclusive Ecosystems RFP, which solicited research and community partnerships within the Heartland states to engage in joint exploration of how to create more equitable opportunities for entrepreneurs in their ecosystems. These pilots have generated a lot of learnings that we hope to institutionalize in our approach to grant making. And we've written a lot about those learnings and some of our impetus behind this work in a number of reports over the last year. I think we'll be dropping links to those reports as well as those portfolios in the chat. And I hope you take some time later to check it out and see the important work our grantees have been leading. A large body of research in implementation science tells us that interventions designed alongside stakeholders are more likely to be used and to be sustainable. We're seeing that borne out in the projects funded in these portfolios, even though they're in the early stages of funding. Inquiry undertaken alongside community is more likely to lead to social change. But I'd like to focus on some of our why as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So much of our ideas about rigor, objectivity, what makes good research, those are all deeply intertwined with and informed by structural racism and systemic white supremacy. This is true, I think, for the structures that make up systems of higher education, and also for those of us working in spaces that touch knowledge creation, funders, publishers, policy stakeholders. And what I mean by that is that the colonial root of so many of our research fields has quietly shaped norms around who studies whom, what questions get asked, and where knowledge is shared, discussed, and debated. It's shaped norms around what kind of knowledge is seen as valuable and true, and what knowledge is labeled as folk, localized, or subjective. Often, this means that knowledge is produced by white researchers, observing people in communities with racial and ethnic backgrounds different from their own. Yes, Skip, a distance that has
I'm sorry, I'm still on mic, I'm sorry. Apologies.
No, don't apologize for positive feedback. And that situation, that distance has been equated with objectivity. So that means that most often, the research that informs our policy decisions is research conducted without any input from those closest to the problem or context being studied. And asking researchers alone to change that system is not enough. We know that more often than not, women and researchers of color are the ones proposing and undertaking community partnered research, folks who already face significant barriers and discrimination within the academy. My own experience as a researcher in this space has been really formative for me in thinking about how philanthropy could and should make positive change in higher education. As a woman of color navigating a desire to conduct community partnered research within university structures and culture that considered that work less rigorous and scholarly was extremely difficult. The most prestigious grants in my field, in most fields, encourage lone researcher style work, for me, lone researcher style ethnographic work, and top tier journals seem to primarily publish theory heavy work that failed to highlight community level or policy impacts. That's why I think it's critical for us to step up as funders and influential stakeholders in knowledge creation. Our investments in making sure that community engaged research is funded, rewarded, and utilized in public policy decisions is also an investment in legitimizing the work of systemically marginalized scholars, as well as the communities they work alongside. So we're really excited to support Elsa, Lauren, and other colleagues at CERC because they know that communities are the experts of their own experience, and it's a moral imperative to increase community involvement in and ownership of research. And they're committing to helping stakeholders institutionalize their approach to supporting engaged research so that researchers aren't working to move the needle alone. With that, I'm excited to pass the mic off to Alicia Small. She leads on a grant that's part of our 2021 Community Engaged Research Portfolio, and she participates in our peer learning cohort for community engaged entrepreneurship researchers. Alicia.
Thank you, Chaya. That was wonderfully spoken. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alicia Small, and I'm so excited to be here today to share on this discussion on institutionalizing community engaged and participatory research practices alongside all of these other wonderful projects. As Chaya mentioned, I currently serve as the principal researcher on a community engaged project studying the impact of urban revitalization on small business owners in Houston's 3rd and 2nd wards. We started in the third ward for this project. So these areas of Houston have been historically Black and brown and have undergone economic, demographic, and overall neighborhood changes over the last 20 years. And as a brief overview, this research blossomed out of my own experience, formerly doing fieldwork in economics at a government agency, and then learning about community engaged research, which I found has similarities to my previous work. However, this method implements even more interaction with people and has a goal for direct impact to a local community rather than a larger community or the nation overall. And this local level of impact has been very important to me as a new researcher in this type of work. So because of the support of the Kauffman Foundation, in the first phase of this project, I've had the wonderful opportunity to be out in the field engaging. And when I say in the field, I mean walking the community and meeting business owners and learning from and alongside community members. This has included those same business owners, residents, community research assistants, and community stakeholders. And the main goals of this work are to learn from incumbent business owners themselves about their successes and challenges of running a business in a neighborhood that is undergoing economic and demographic change, to recruit community research assistants to learn and contribute their skills to the research, whether they have experience or not. Also to present the results back to the community first and with community partners first, and to present those findings back in an accessible way that community members can relate, not just academics, and get community members' feedback. We will actually be using the Urban Institute's data walk model, which is so exciting, and a link will be shared in the chat as an example. And so another goal is to leave tangible benefits within the community, to contribute to the community long after I and the research team have gone. And finally, and one that has really grown to be one that I find to be very important to me, is to develop positive long-term relationships between the community and the institutions, such as universities, supporting this work. So this work is truly a process of building relationships, and that takes time. And I've learned that it is not traditional, particularly for an economic study. And in this sense of building trust with the community of interest, or like I like to say, being served, this is definitely not an overnight process. This is not sitting in one's office and reading scholarly works to make a determination about a community, or only reviewing data sets that are supposed to represent that community. No, instead, this is getting the data points directly from the people, such as the business owners, that those data sets represent. And I believe there's a place for data sets, but there should also be a welcome place in research for people sets and their lived experiences, and pursue their guidance and contributions to the work. They know their community and their experience and can express them better than anyone else. I know there is value in this type of contribution in studies to impact policy. Theory can only take us so far in making change. And I really appreciate what Chaya said when she said real inquiry undertaken alongside community is more likely to lead to social change. So that is why it's so important that grant-making institutions such as Kauffman, as well as research institutions, support community engaged and participatory research, especially and communities where historically extraction of information has occurred rather than real investment into the prosperity of those same communities. So this is why I prefer to say that I'm serving the Third Ward of Houston rather than researching Third Ward. I believe the idea of serving places research practices into a whole other context. And serving typically means that someone else is benefiting from one service, right? So you may or may not get the response that you thought you would. However, you still served and left the other person or that community with something. And the goal of this work is and has always been to include community members in the work, to produce data-driven findings, to inform policy from a business owner's perspective, and to leave investments in the community. So I'm so excited to discuss our topics more, and I'll pass it back to you, Elsa.
Thank you so much, Chaya and Alicia. I'll let you both take a quick break off camera, but just would really like to thank you for those words around the important role of funding and also your personally really vulnerable reflections about your work. Really appreciated that. I would like to ask all of our speakers now to turn their cameras on and to join me back on the virtual stage. I'd like everybody to be able to see your faces and your name as I give you all an effusive and heartfelt thank you for what each of you shared today and for your commitments and the work that you put into all of this every day. Inequities, racism, and exclusion, which came up in almost all of the comments that you shared with us today, are not just the practices of individuals. They are baked into our systems, our culture, and our structures. And it takes time, creativity, bravery, and tenacity to effect lasting change that enables our work to center equity through participatory methods. It also takes a village of allies to support each other with strategies, recover from the challenges or failures, and to hold each other accountable. And that's something that I take from each and every one of you and look forward to continuing that work all together. I'll now share just a few things about the Community Engagement Resource Center at Urban, our commitment. As part of our commitment, we are making available a number of different resources and also open to all of your suggestions and ideas around other things that we should offer as we continue to develop the Resource Center. One of the main things that we offer is a set of toolkits. The first, which you heard from several people today, is the Data Walk Guidebook. You can find that, and I believe Lauren dropped it into the chat. It's a great first step for those who are just beginning to engage in participatory work with communities. We also have 3 new tools coming out around compensation, probably the most frequently asked question anytime I do a webinar or a meeting. Positionality and quantitative participatory methods, all of which our different speakers mentioned today. We also have tools on running community advisory boards, developing and sustaining partnerships, working with young people, and participatory survey. We also have a community engaged methods internship. We are developing a community engaged methods training. We provide technical assistance. We have piloted an institutional community advisory board that Skip participated in the piloting of that with us. And we also want to build, probably most importantly, a community and have folks come out of the woodwork, which is part of why we're doing this today. Our partners at Pew are really leading that, and we look forward to collaborating with them in the future to really build out the network that Angela told us about. And a big part of why we organized this event today and included such a wide range of speakers is to make sure that we are really thinking of this outside of academia, outside of community-based participatory research. There are so many ways to look at the intersection of research, policy, and practice for this work. We want to have a space where others are also forging the same innovative strategies, facing many of the same challenges, and motivated by similar missions and objectives. So we plan to respond to all of your questions and send out responses as a first form of follow-up from this event and an opportunity to continue conversations with each of you moving forward. So I'd like to thank all of you for participating today and share forth closing things in closing. We ask that anyone who wishes to be a continued part of these conversations and community fill out a form that Lauren will share in the chat. You can share your contact information and your interests. And you can also share any resources that you've developed or that you use regularly in your work that we can share with the rest of participants. and include on our website as resources for others. We will share out all of the links and other resources that we shared in the chat. I know there was an issue with copying and pasting those today, but that will be part of the notes that we share out. And all of the questions and comments will also be included there. We have a second session today at 3 p.m. That in case this felt like the antithesis of participatory methods and that the audience was not invited in for question and answer or discussion, the discussion-based portion of this event will be at 3 p.m. Eastern this afternoon. We are unfortunately at capacity, but we will be hosting more of these kinds of discussions in the future. So please be on the lookout. So thank you again all for your time today. Please be in touch, hold us accountable, and best of luck in all of your efforts to move this work forward. Have a good day.